You walk into the supermarket, grab a package of ground beef, toss it into your cart, and think nothing of it. After all, beef is beef, right? Wrong. What's hiding behind some of America's most recognized meat labels would make even the most devoted carnivore think twice before firing up the grill. From E. coli outbreaks and secret antibiotic injections to deforestation scandals and deceptive labeling, the U.S. beef industry has a troubling track record that rarely makes the evening news. Powerful lobbies, weak federal enforcement, and a food system designed to prioritize profit over public health have left consumers largely in the dark. This article pulls back the curtain on 8 U.S. beef brands and producers you should think twice about, and explains the real dangers lurking on those refrigerated shelves. 1. Cargill Meat Solutions. The giant with a dirty record. Cargill is one of the largest privately held corporations in the United States, and its beef division is everywhere, from Walmart shelves to fast food supply chains. But size has not translated into safety or responsibility. A Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation by the New York Times in 2009 found that Cargill's own negligence contributed to a 2007 E. coli outbreak that affected 845,000 pounds of ground beef. Nearly a decade later, in 2018, another 78 tons of contaminated Cargill beef caused yet another E. coli outbreak. Then, in May 2024, more than 16,000 pounds of raw ground beef products, including prime rib beef steak burger patties sold at Walmart, were recalled after concerns of E. coli O157:H7 contamination. The recall was triggered when Cargill discovered that a segregated product had accidentally been mixed into the batch. E. coli O157:H7 is not a minor inconvenience. Symptoms include severe stomach cramps, bloody diarrhea, and vomiting. In the worst cases, it can lead to hemolytic uremic syndrome, a life-threatening condition that causes kidney failure. Beyond contamination, Cargill has also faced allegations of price-fixing and pressuring government officials to keep its plants open during the COVID-19 pandemic, even as workers fell ill. The company operates in 70 countries and wields enormous political influence, which critics argue has allowed it to escape meaningful accountability. 2. JBS USA, Deforestation, Antibiotics, and Global Scandal. JBS is the world's largest meat processing company, and its American operations supply beef to some of the most recognizable names in fast food, including McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, and Outback Steakhouse. The scale is staggering, and so are the controversies. Amnesty International reported in 2020 that JBS continued to purchase cattle from farms illegally logging the Amazon rainforest. According to environmental watchdog Mighty Earth, JBS has been responsible for approximately 42,538 hectares of Brazilian deforestation, an area roughly half the size of New York City. On the antibiotic front, JBS explicitly permits the preventive use of antibiotics in its beef supply chain. While the company mandates that suppliers track antibiotic use, it does not require them to share that data with JBS itself. No specific public data on antibiotic use is made available to consumers. JBS has also faced accusations of price-fixing and lobbying efforts that prioritized keeping meatpacking plants running over the health and safety of its workers during the pandemic. For a company this large, the lack of transparency is not just a business concern. It's a public health issue. 3. National Beef Packing Company. Hormones, steroids, and climate denial. National Beef is one of the 4 largest beef processors in the United States, and according to Consumer Reports, the company uses antibiotics on its livestock not only to treat illness, but also to prevent disease and promote growth. That distinction matters enormously. When antibiotics are used preventively and at scale, they contribute to the development of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, a global health crisis already responsible for more than 35,000 deaths annually in the United States alone. Experts warn that if left unchecked, drug-resistant infections could kill 39 million people worldwide by 2050. National beef has also been documented using hormones and steroids to accelerate livestock growth. Research from New York University, published in the scientific journal Climatic Change, found that National Beef has made statements in SEC filings and quarterly reports linking climate regulation with potential harm to its profitability, effectively opposing environmental accountability. Additionally, National Beef has been tied to allegations of price fixing alongside other major meat packers, raising questions about whether consumers are paying fair prices for a product that cuts corners at every turn. 4. Wolverine Packing Company. The Michigan E. coli outbreak. In November 2024, the USDA announced the recall of more than 160,000 pounds of ground beef supplied by Wolverine Packing Company, a Michigan-based meat packer. The reason? Fears of E. coli 0157:H7 contamination, the same dangerous strain capable of causing kidney failure and, in vulnerable populations, death. What made this recall especially troubling was the sheer volume involved. Over 160,000 pounds of beef, potentially tainted with one of the most dangerous foodborne pathogens, had entered the supply chain before any alarm was raised. This is not a one-off incident in the industry. It's a recurring pattern that suggests structural failures in safety oversight rather than isolated accidents. Wolverine specializes in a range of meat products, including veal, poultry, boxed beef, and lamb, and its products reach consumers across multiple states. The November 2024 recall served as a stark reminder that even brands consumers may not recognize by name can be present in their refrigerators through retail channels and food service suppliers. 5. Lakeside Refrigerated Services. Multiple brands, one recall. In April 2022, more than 120,000 pounds of ground beef products were recalled due to E. coli concerns by Lakeside Refrigerated Services. The products were manufactured between February and April of that year, meaning they had been on shelves and in consumers' homes for weeks before the recall was announced. What made this particularly alarming was the breadth of brands affected. The recall included products sold under the labels Nature's Reserve, Thomas Farms, Tajima Beef Patties, and Marketside Butcher Wagyu beef, a brand associated with premium, high-end beef. That last name is worth pausing on. Wagyu beef is marketed as a luxury product, often priced significantly higher than standard ground beef. Consumers paying a premium for a superior product had no way of knowing that it had been processed under the same conditions that led to a mass E. coli recall. This case is a revealing example of how premium marketing and actual safety standards can be entirely disconnected in the U.S. beef industry. 6. Sky Ranch Premium Provisions. On. Allergen Cover-Up. In April 2026, the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service issued a public health alert for marinated beef products sold under the Quality Meat Sky Ranch Premium Provisions brand. The products, including marinated beef ribeye rolls and bulgogi-style cuts, were found to contain sesame, a known allergen that was not declared on the label. For the estimated 1.5 million Americans with sesame allergies, an undeclared allergen is not a minor labeling issue. It can be life-threatening. Anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction, can cause the throat to swell shut within minutes of exposure. The products were produced between December 2025 and April 2026, meaning thousands of packages had already reached consumers before the alert was issued. A recall was not even requested because, by the time the issue was identified, the products were no longer available for purchase, a troubling detail that offers cold comfort to anyone who may have already consumed them. 7. Brands caught lying about raised without antibiotics claims. This entry is not about a single brand, it's about a category of deception that affects dozens of them. In 2024, testing by the USDA found that approximately 1 in 5 samples of beef labeled as raised without antibiotics, RWA, tested positive for antibiotic residues. Critically, this included products from 3 of the 4 largest meatpacking companies in the country. According to Consumer Reports, the problem stems from a deeply flawed verification system. To use an RWA label, companies must submit documentation to the USDA, but only once. After that initial filing, there are no mandatory inspections, no routine testing, and no ongoing verification. The entire system, in the words of one food safety expert quoted by Consumer Reports, runs on the honor system. And the financial incentives to cheat are considerable. Antibiotic-free beef commands premium prices from health-conscious consumers. When the label is applied to beef that doesn't qualify, companies profit twice, once from the antibiotic-fueled growth of the animals and again from the inflated price tag on the shelf. Consumer advocacy group PIRG confirmed these findings, noting that one survey found buying antibiotic-free meat was slightly to very important to 87% of consumers. A massive market being systematically deceived. 8. The all-natural label trap. Big names, hollow claims. Walk through any grocery store and you'll see all-natural splashed across beef packaging from dozens of brands, including many from household names that supply Costco, Kroger, and Walmart. But all-natural is one of the most meaningless labels in the food industry. Unlike USDA Organic, the all-natural designation has no federal requirement that prohibits the use of hormones, antibiotics, or factory farming conditions. It simply means that the product has not been artificially colored or chemically preserved after slaughter. The cow could have spent its entire life in a crowded feedlot, pumped with synthetic hormones and preventive antibiotics, and the resulting beef can still legally be called all-natural. As the Cornucopia Institute has documented, the majority of beef in the U.S. comes from industrialized concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, where cattle are confined in crowded lots, fed an unnatural diet of grain, and medicated to survive conditions that would otherwise make them sick. These operations produce an estimated 500 million tons of animal waste annually, waste that can contaminate local groundwater with hormones, antibiotics, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Brands that rely on this system and market their products as all-natural are not lying in a legal sense, but they are misleading consumers in a way that is, by any honest standard, deeply deceptive. What can you do? The U.S. beef industry is dominated by a handful of massive corporations with enormous political influence and little incentive to change voluntarily. Regulatory agencies like the USDA and FDA are chronically under-resourced and, critics argue, far too close to the industries they are supposed to oversee. But consumers are not entirely powerless. Here's what the evidence suggests actually works. Look for USDA Organic certification. Unlike all-natural or even raised without antibiotics, the organic seal requires annual inspections, prohibits antibiotics and growth hormones at every stage of the animal's life, and mandates access to pasture. It is the most reliable label available to U.S. consumers. Seek out the American Grass-Fed Association, AGA, seal. This requires third-party inspections every 15 months and prohibits antibiotics and hormones. Consumer Reports gives it an excellent rating. Be skeptical of premium labels without third-party verification. Wagyu, prime, and all-natural sound impressive, but carry no meaningful guarantees about farming practices or safety. Buy from local farms and farmers' markets when possible. Direct relationships with producers allow consumers to ask real questions about how their beef is raised and get real answers. Support policy reform. Consumer advocacy groups like PIRG are pushing for mandatory independent verification of antibiotic-free claims. Contacting elected representatives and supporting organizations working on food system reform can create pressure for systemic change. The bottom line. The beef industry's problems are not the result of a few bad actors. They are the predictable outcome of a system designed to produce cheap protein at maximum scale with minimal regulatory oversight and maximum marketing spin. E. coli outbreaks, deceptive labeling, hormone and antibiotic overuse, deforestation, and worker exploitation are not anomalies. They are features of a broken industrial food system. The brands and practices described in this article represent the sharp end of a much larger problem, Every time a consumer chooses to ask harder questions, demand better standards, and spend their food dollars more deliberately, they send a signal that the industry cannot afford to ignore. Your next trip to the meat aisle might be worth a second look.